This is Getting Past the Subtitles. I am Sean Peel.
This is DK Lee.
And welcome to week number 2 of our Thailand Films Expose. Just to recap from last week, we kicked off with Bad Genius from 2017, right?
Yep.
Pretty cool film. I liked it. Lee liked it, I think. I don't know, maybe he's holding out on me. Maybe you just lied for my feelings.
Maybe.
But this week, we're going on Lee's pick with Ong Bak, a bit of a classic from 2003. This movie was directed by Prachya Pinkaew, I think. I probably butchered that name so hard. But it stars Tony Jaa, who is a kind of a stunt icon. You know, you may have or may not have heard of him, but that's what we're here for. But, you know, he sits up there at the high table with, like, Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee, Jet Li, etc., etc. And, yeah, if you watch this movie, you know why. You should definitely know why. No CGI, no wires, just straight taking them hits, you know? This was my first time watching it. I mean, I've always been familiar with Ong Bak and Tony Jaa, but I've never really went in to kind of see why, unlike Jackie Chan. Probably seen him around. Like, he was in Furious 7, apparently. He had a cameo there, which I don't really remember, but it's been a while since I've seen Furious 7. But watching this movie, my first words were definitely impressed. It's a movie that, like, it wants to and it does leave an impression, you know? And, like, to me, I saw this movie as, like, it really replicates, like, the Jackie Chan films that we saw from, like, the 80s and the 90s. But Thailand is, like, making their statement saying, hey, we have martial arts and we can make films too. And, you know, this movie, like, really kind of sends that message for me. And I think that, you know, with this film, you kind of have to watch it with, for me personally, you have to watch it with that kind of lens as, like, Thailand making their own breakthrough kind of martial arts film. And that alone will make it, like, you know, give it its purpose in a good film. Because rather than that, it's, you know, the story's like, and some other things, but it's a good martial arts film through and through, you know? In the midst of, like, you know, post-Jackie Chan era and, like, Bruce Lee and all these things, it's like, oh, Muay Thai is legit too. What about you? How was your what's your experience and impressions?
I watched this when I was a wee little boy. So watching
Little
this
Lee.
at that age and seeing this man fly around like it's nothing and, like, walk on human beings and, you know, run across walls and break bike helmets and doing all these crazy things, you really get inspired. You're in awe of the possibilities of the human body. So yeah,
I feel like
really
there has to be
enjoyed it.
like hidden trampolines somewhere because some of those like flying knees were just so long.
Yeah, the way that he's able to control his body is just crazy. There's so many moments where you're just like, dang, how is he doing that with such ease and control, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it really reminds me of, like, Jackie Chan and all these great martial artists and stunt people who have shown us what they can do. And I think that this film is a continuation of that, but also a new take on that, in the sense of showing kind of the brutality and the beauty of Muay Thai.
Right.
And it really, at that time in 2003, it really kind of put Muay Thai on the map and showed the world what Muay Thai is about. And people began to see Muay Thai as a wonderful martial arts.
Right.
And like this is around the time when like the UFC was also growing, and so a lot of that kind of came at the right moment together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. It kind of had a good timing with kind of everything in the modern era,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of like a legitimacy as well as outside of kind of like a Hollywood-esque sort of imagery to it.
Yeah.
But I do believe this week is your turn, your movie, your responsibility, sir. What exactly did we watch here?
So we watched Ong Bak, which is set in this small little village called Ban Nong Pradu, which is in the rural area of Thailand. And here, the village people, they worship, Buddha, and they have like the ceremony, and they have this Buddha statue. But then one of the thugs, the village thugs, he like steals the statue because he feels like he can make money off the statue, the head of the statue, by selling it to one of the, I guess, the underground gangster people in Bangkok. And so the guy steals the statue. His name is Don. Yeah, Don steals the statue head and he brings it to Bangkok, or he takes it to Bangkok. And he tries to sell it, but then the underground gangster boss, he basically says it's worthless and he refuses to buy it. And after Don leaves the village, Ting, the main character, Tony Jaa, Ting decides that he's going to go find the statue and bring it back for the village before the ceremony starts.
Right.
And so Ting goes off to Bangkok with the little money that the village people gathered together, and he sets off to Bangkok. And while in Bangkok, one of the uncles tells Ting to go find George, or Hum Lai, who is the cousin of Ting. And he tells him to go find him so he can help you find the statue head. And so he goes to Bangkok and he gets there and he coincidentally meets Hum Lai, but he's kind of like a con artist and he goes around trying to con people.
He just has a gambling debt.
Yeah,
like
so
a
he like
very severe gambling debt.
He like goes around conning people, trying to make money off of them. And he is talking to Ting and he sees that he has money, so he basically tries to steal the money, and he like brings him to his place and he's like, hey, you can stay here, you can rest and chill, go take a shower. And while he's trying to take a shower, he steals the money and he runs off to a underground fight club basically. And he goes and bets the money on the fight that's happening there. And while that's happening, Ting goes and chases after him at the fight club. And one thing leads to another, and Ting basically gets into a fight in the fight club. And basically he destroys the guy with one kick. And the gangster boss is watching. And he's actually betting on the fights as well. And he loses the bet because Ting destroys the dude. Yeah, so after that, Hum Lai goes again to a casino, basically, underground casino, and he does a con again. And he basically, cons the people in the casino. And he, leaves. But then the casino manager, he finds out and basically sends gangsters to go chase him. And so the gangsters begin to chase Hum Lai and Muay, which is the friend of Hum Lai. And Ting basically gets caught up in all of that, and they start chasing Ting as well. After that, they go back to the club, and Ting has to fight again because he has to make the money, and so he goes and he wins and gains the respect of the people in the fight club. And after that, Hom Lai and Ting, they go and they find Don's hideout. They have this like big chase scene in the river, and they fall into the river, and Ting discovers that there's like a crap ton of treasure in the river that the boss has been hiding. And the police find out, and they basically take all the it's basically like national treasures that he has been hiding in the water. And because of that, the gangster boss basically loses all of his treasures, and he blames that on Ting and Hum Lao, and the gangster boss kidnaps Muay and Hum Lai to blackmail Ting. And so he says that, I need to make my money back, so I'm going to have you fight, and I want you to throw the match.
Right.
If you throw the match, then I'll give you back the statue head. That's what he offers. And so Ting decides to do it, and he basically throws the match. He gets beaten up and throws the match. But then the gangster boss, he says, I'm not going to give you back the statue head because,
I'm a double cross you.
yeah, because I don't care. I'll do what I want. Ting chases after the boss, and he gets the statue back. And while they're fighting, Hum Lai dies in the midst of that. And then Ting and Muay goes back to the village, and they have a burial for Hum Lao, and that's how it ends.
What a sad ending.
It's kind of happy. the scene is, but yeah,
they literally like went from like one scene of like Hom Lai dying and like dramatic tear crying, and then like the next shot is a ceremony of like either his funeral or like Ting becoming the monk.
Yeah.
But it's
one
like
or the other, but
it's like so like fast and juxtaposing that you don't know what to feel.
Yeah.
Like, okay. You're like, all right, happy ever after, kind of. Not really.
Yeah, but the story in itself is pretty simple.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just like all it is Ting just trying to get back the statue head, and it's got this very like small town country boy into the big city life setting kind of vibe,
It's like Taken, or it's like John Wick, except without the dog. It's switched with the statue head.
it's a head of a Buddhist statue.
Yeah, and apparently they call that Ong Bak, the statue. So.
Yeah. I was like, that makes sense. I was like, oh, but so his name is not Ong Bak, but it's Ting, and the statue is Ong Bak. Oh, okay, I get it. It all makes sense. Yeah, I mean, all in all, a really fun movie. But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on the story first?
Honestly, I actually think the story's not as bad as people make it out to be. Interestingly enough, the original cut of this film, they actually had a little bit more subplot stuff in it.
Yeah.
But then a lot of that was cut out for the Western release. And I don't know if you remember the drug scene with that girl and Dawn, and
I think her name?
She overdoses, right? That's actually Mui's sister, who overdoses on the drugs and basically dies, and that's like a whole subplot in itself that was supposed to be there, but they cut that out. Honestly, I don't think it was a bad cutout, but
it's not as bad as it could have been, but when you do go back and see it, like even when I went back, I was like, it makes sense. Like once you realize that there's a hole there, you're like, oh, okay.
It would have been nice because that segment of the film kind of feels out of place because you're in Don's like hideout, and that scene kind of happens for like a good minute or two, and you're
Right.
kind of like, what's going on here? Why are we seeing this all of a sudden? So if there was that subplot to ease us into that moment, it might have been a little bit more helpful, especially when there's that little moment too where Hum Lao talks to Muay and they're like talking about like, oh, everyone dies. You have to, it's okay. Like everyone dies. Like you have to get over it.
It's
moment,
like super downplayed.
Yeah, it's
like,
so
weird.
downplayed, and you're just like, okay, that just like ends like nothing, right? And so if that subplot kind of existed, and we saw it, it might have been a little bit better. But the thing is, that moment was so short that it might have been worse. It might have just been like, wow, like your sister just died, and you're like, and that's all you.
That's
all
how
you
you're
say,
gonna like
that's
run
all
over
that
it.
happens.
It goes from like downplayed to like really downplayed.
Yeah, like she is more sad when Hum Lao dies than her own sister.
Right.
So yeah, like I don't know. It would have been interesting to watch though. It would have been interesting to see what was there.
Right.
But unfortunately, the Western release of it has it cut out, so it does streamline it more, which is for an action film, maybe that's what they wanted.
Sure.
I think for the Western release, they were like, oh, like people aren't gonna care about this. We just want to see the action.
Right.
I think that's what happened.
It does keep it in line with like the overall pacing of the film.
True.
Because overall, like the movie does bounce like scene to scene, location to location. So it really keeps the story kind of driving forward.
Yeah.
And I think cutting that keeps that pace, and instead of like including like just like that sort of like a moment of drama, and then everything else is kind of like typical action filmy. So I agree with you there.
It's interesting because as a story, there's setup and payoffs in the film, which make it pretty fun to watch. Like there are little moments, when the bodyguard of the boss, gangster boss, being the end boss fighting the dual guy. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, he was juicing, man.
Yeah,
he juicing. I freaking cracked up when he did like the mega juice at the end.
Dude, I don't think that's how drugs work.
Six like needles popped out of nowhere, and he was like, ugh, and like
in his chest,
like had to use his entire palm to like push all of the plungers down.
Yeah, I don't think that's how enhancing yourself works. You don't just stick needles in your body randomly.
So like the logic goes, so Nagek, the sister, ODs being smothered by coke, but this guy like turns into Doomsday by injecting himself with 6 needles of like meth or whatever.
It's a random thing that we have no idea what it is. But yeah, overall, I think the story, it's not like it's nothing special, but I don't think it was a detriment to the film in any way.
Yeah.
So
100. Yeah, I agree. Because like it's not it's not the highlight of the movie, right? It's really not what it's not what it wants to do. It's really showcasing like Tony Jaa and like in Muay Thai, and like really making it just an action film.
Yeah.
And choreography, and it's really good at doing that, And I mean, the story is just kind of like a side piece in that regard. I mean, like if you're watching any Jackie Chan film, like we watched when we did our action series previously, like it's so fun to watch, and when you're watching like Police Story, you're there for like the stunts and the action, and you're not too much invested into the story, but it's fine, it's
like
not,
it's fun, like it's interesting to watch, and it's interesting to see the story. Especially, I love the comedic moments in this movie too, little gags that really reminded me of Jackie Chan, especially like during the chase in the market and stuff.
Oh yeah,
and what's his name, George Hum La, is like he takes this little knife and then he gets a bigger knife. And then there's the knife merchant who like goes through and
knives for sale. Knives for sale.
Little things like that really enhance the action and the comedic moment.
It's all about like action. The characters too. Like I mean that's pretty essential when you're making an action film.
Right.
And like keep the livelihood kind of going,
And like the pacing, it really like pushes the pacing with the comedy.
Yeah, it's why like when I was watching this, as I was going through it, it's like, oh, what's like, oh, of course it has that, and like having these martial arts check boxes, kind of like checking off, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, like the foot chase, check,
Hmm.
like the Jackie Chan esque like foot chase and like the fence hop shot, like
The
oh check,
parkour, yeah, check.
park, random parkour check, you know,
Like
fighting with
going through
tables
tight
and chairs,
spaces, check.
huh?
Sliding under cars, check.
Under cars check, doing a split check,
Yeah.
like all these things like kind of like check the boxes in the movie that it really stretches out to do, you know.
You can really see there's a lot of inspiration from the
Yeah.
older kung fu and these action movies that came before it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's funny because, I mean, to me, if it was even made in like the '90s or late '80s, I probably would have bought it because it just has all those like that dimension to it, and it
Hmm.
keeps the tone of those kinds of movies rather than being like a 2000 era kind of film, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got like the action Hollywood takes as like the 2000s. I mean, like car chase scenes and Michael Bay explosions everywhere. But then it like mixes in all those kind of like martial arts things that we know and love, like
Yeah.
practical stunts and like this this like funny fine line of like low budgety stunts and look to it, but then at like a high budget kind of scale and
Yeah.
um, kind of take to it. Yeah, I mean, in many ways, the movie feels like a Thai fan film to martial arts films and like a homage to like 80s and 90s kind of like martial arts films just because it just shares and like has so many nods and scenes and sequences to do that with, you know, like
Yeah.
parkour and like Jackie Chan. There's even like that Bruce Lee fighter guy,
Yeah.
like he's like the Jukindo.
Hmm.
It's just like all these things that you know it's just like a big nod to the genre itself. And Ty's like, yeah, we can do it too, and they kind of are part of it.
Yeah, for sure.
What is so what is your favorite like fight scene or action sequence?
I mean, there's so many good scenes, and I think the beauty of this film is how they shot it. Like
Mm.
a lot of like they show everything, and that's the key thing. I think that it connects this film to all the other like kung
100%.
fu action films that come before it, which is we're not gonna cut. We're
Yeah.
going to show you everything. We're gonna show you in a wide, and we're gonna show you multiple angles. We're gonna shoot it with a few cameras so that we
Right.
have like three different angles of that one stunt. And when you see the editing, you see the same action like three times in three cuts, right?
Right.
So like
Right.
he goes in through the hoop once, and you see a
Uh-huh.
different angle of that. Or like he does one kick, and you see the same kick like three times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in a conventional editing sense, that might seem weird because you're showing the same thing over and over again. But because the action is so good, like you want to see those different angles, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and by showing those different angles, I feel like there's a bigger impact on
Yeah.
that hit or on that landing, And I
Mm.
think that really adds to the impact of the action.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like going back to the other action films that we watched. That's a through line in these action films where they actually do the stunts. They're
Right.
like, dude, it took us a lot to get this stunt. We're gonna show you it as many times as we can. It has that feeling to it, and I think that really
Yeah.
makes the action believable and fun to watch because you're just like, wow, this guy really did this. And I think that's like the fun of this film.
Yeah. And it's like it's impressive that the sense of flawlessness that he can do it because he always ends it with like a perfect stance or something. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like he never like there's not a moment where he does a flip or like does a split or even when he's like doing fight choreographies and he like does like a flying knee or like some crazy like roundhouse kick that that you see him like trip up or like miss a step and like tries to get back on his feet. He just like plants like like
Yeah.
every time, and he's like just so confident with his
Yeah.
moves and his body. Yeah, it's like I said, it is definitely the formula to like that this kind of martial arts films,
Mm.
and it's it's like shooting around the choreography itself rather than progressing the story or like progressing the fight sequence from point A to point B.
Right.
Like the way that they shoot it is just like around the choreography. And
Like, how
wanting
can
to
I
show off the
showcase
moves.
this choreography as best as possible, right?
Right. Show everything in its full, like, if he's doing a punch or a kick, it's never a close up or like anything, or like a medium shot of just the leg hitting the body. You see like Tony's everything, like his entire body, going through the motions of it.
You see that moment of impact, and you feel bad for the guy getting hit. 'Cause it looks like it hurts,
And sometimes there's shots of like just a move, like a single move. Like, if it's like a big move where like when he was fighting that like the Bruce Lee like guy who's like does all the kicks and he does like a front roundhouse kick and then Tony like does like a spinning background kick and he like just misses his leg and it's like a cross kick.
Yeah.
Like it cuts to like just that one shot. Like this is a big moment, So it does a great job of emphasizing like we're gonna keep like they keep a shot for a sequence in a fight, and then when they cut to a new shot, and you can tell like, oh, that's a big move, because they frame it like perfectly.
Yeah, they emphasize those certain moments where they want you to focus on certain things.
Right.
But overall, like you can see his whole body, and you know that there's nothing being faked there, and
Exactly.
that's the wonder of this movie. And there's sequels to this movie, and there's other movies that Tony Jaa is in, and when you watch those movies, like just more and more you watch him, the more stuff that he does, you're just like in awe of the things that he's able to do. And I think that's the beauty of like watching Tony Jaa, where like it's kind of like Jackie Chan. You're just wondering, what's the next crazy thing he's gonna do.
Right.
And for this too, I think it's in that vein, but a lot of Jackie Chan is like comedic action, whereas I think in Ong Bak and Tony Jaa, it's a lot of like martial arts. It's a lot of very brutal hit action,
Yeah.
And I think that's also another difference that makes Tony Jaa's films fun to watch in its own right.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's definitely more of an emphasis like on the combat itself, rather than more of a comedic reaction that Jackie Chan has notoriously done for himself. This movie is definitely something to limelight Muay Thai, and Tony Jaa does a great job of doing that. And like I said, like it really showing the brutality of that kind of like skill, and like in the combat, it does a pretty good job. It's a violent movie. I mean, there's some sequences you're like, damn.
Yeah, there are just some shots and some hits. You're just wondering, damn, that must have hurt. Because you see the actual hitting moment impacting. So, like, even if they kind of pulled it back, or it didn't even look like they pulled it back. It looks like the guy took the hit.
There are some fight scenes where it's like you kind of see it, and then there are others when you're like, man, they just like didn't like pull anything.
Yeah.
Like for me, the last in the cave, which is the last scene, where there's a bunch of fights, but he's like fighting all the guys that are like dressed in black or whatever. Like that whole sequence, the hand-to-hand combat, not with the like even the weapons was like pretty bad to look like.
Yeah.
But the hand-to-hand combat, like there was a bunch of kicks in that sequence, and like all those people took it because they like closed up on the kicks, and those people were like just straight taking foot to the face.
Yeah, like that moment, even with the weapons too. Like some of those, I mean, obviously he did pull back on some of the hits, but it just looked brutal,
Just like the fierceness, just like throw that bow.
Yeah.
Sling it around.
And even when he's fighting, I think Big Bear, one of the guys in the fight club, and he's fighting him, and like he's like throwing the chairs and like
that was Mad Dog.
Oh, Mad Dog, yeah. Like
that was so wild. That scene.
And like he pushes him with the table, and like he kicks the table. And there's also that moment when there's a saw. The guy uses that big like saw thing, and he starts like whipping him with the saw.
Like wobbling.
Yeah. And like he like blocks it with his arms, and you're just like, damn, dude, that still looks like it hurts.
Just like get stabbed in the arm. Like even if it's prosthetics or whatever, like it still looks pretty gnarly. there's definitely a level of brutality to it. Yeah, I mean, even like it's funny because there's like in the last cave scene, like 2 people get their arms broken off, which is like
one guy with
like,
the arm and one guy his leg, right?
Yeah. Come to on, he like pops his leg, like sits on it.
Yeah.
And then Home Leg gets his like arm like
broke.
straight up broken. Like he like grabs it, plants it, and it just like knees it right in half. And you're like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Apparently that got cut in like the Chinese release of the film in Hong Kong. They cut those out.
Mm.
Yeah. This movie got
what were some of your favorite action moments?
I mean, maybe I think I really like the Bruce Lee like character. I think I like that fight sequence the most, just because it was maybe the most creative in a sense, and it like also like kind of told like a mini like story. Like it had a progress to it, you know?
Yeah.
Where I mean that, and like he's just an interesting character overall. Like he was to me like between him and Mad Dog, which like Mad Dog was hilarious. But like, he like fights Big Bear, and then like he gets into 2 other fights like without even wanting to, and then you have like this Bruce Lee guy come out and he's like all kicks, and then then you can see like Ting is like learning him, and then then he like outmasters him, in the fight. But like even some of the choreography and some of the moves that they did were just super creative and super cool to look at, where he just like blocks his kicks with like his own leg blocks.
Yeah.
And it's just very, there's so much variety and so much difference in the movie.
That moment really tells a story of him learning how that guy attacks and how he moves, and he's figuring that out, and he starts to counter him, and that's really fun to watch. Like I really liked when he's fighting Mad Dog at the end, and he jumps out of the window and he kicks him, he knees him while he's jumping out of the window.
Out of the glass.
Yeah, it's just crazy stuff like that. But one of my favorite ones is when right after they get kidnapped and basically the gangster boss tells the thugs to kill them.
Yeah.
And he goes and they're in that like gas station area, and like things blow up. And he comes out with flaming pants, and he just does his flaming kick.
It was just like, oh, of course, like, oh yeah, of course that's included.
And like this is all real, right? Like, and apparently he almost like burned his like eyebrows off or something like that while he was doing it.
I can imagine. I'm surprised he didn't get like 2nd-degree burns or something. On his legs.
But seriously, like some of the things that they do,
dude. Some of the things are just crazy. I mean, I think like one of the scariest stunts for me that I saw was like the last stunt with during the car chase. So like they were doing like it was like a weird car chase with these trolley taxis on 3 wheels.
The tuk-tuk chases.
Huh? Oh, tuk-tuks.
Tuk-tuk, yeah.
And it was the guy that was chasing after Ting, and then Ting like hits the brake, and then the tuk-tuk like flies over his, and it falls into like the alleyway. But there are people like
down
eating and sitting around there, and there are like
2 guys like next to the
they're
crash.
like so close. They're like right next to the landing zone. I'm like, that could have just gone wrong.
And those 2 guys are just chilling there. They're just like
exactly. Like they were like sitting till the end. They didn't. If they missed if that trolley just like missed a little bit, just like right on their table.
Yeah, I mean you can tell it's like 2 different locations, but still like, it's pretty impressive just like seeing that happen.
I would have been like, I gotta stand 10 feet away from that trolley.
Word.
I don't want to be inches
anywhere near it. Yeah,
exactly. I don't want to be inches away from it.
But yeah, like those things remind me of like the Jackie Chan movie that we watched, like Police Story, like that scene in that like favela looking area that they built, that construction that they built.
Oh, the shantytown.
Yeah, the shantytown. Yeah.
It's such a wild scene. Like, we built an entire shantytown just to run like 6 cars through it. Yeah. And then place bombs on each and every row. Send it.
Yeah, there's it's fun to watch this film because you can see the different inspirations that they got from different
Yeah.
films. Like you talked about the guy with the kicks. That's really like a Bruce Lee moment. Like there's
sure.
there's like I think in Enter the Dragon where like Bruce Lee fights maybe it was Chuck Norris. I forget he fights somebody, but like he does the same thing where he like tests it out and like he
Right.
tries to learn the guy and how to fight the guy and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And that storytelling beat of action, that really is like a Bruce Lee thing. Like the comedic moments and bits is really like an inspiration from like Jackie Chan and stuff. And so
Yeah.
like seeing all of those things come into this film and bear fruit is really fun. You know, knowing that, knowing other action films and seeing how that correlates and how that relates to this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is just like it takes a bite out of like everybody, like all these notorious action film kind of genres, and it is a mix of these things, with like its own Muay Thai taste and kind of like Thai flair to it that
Yeah.
adds a bit of originality to it in that sense, and it works. I mean, overall, I think it works really well.
There's this one edit that I found really funny but like really effective was like when they're in the alleyway and the gangs like they first come in, right? And they have that jump cut of the gang coming in. They're meeting like Hum Lao and Ting and Moy are like in the alleyway. And
Yeah.
then the guy from the casino, he comes with all
The
the
old guy.
gang people. The
Uh-huh.
very first time they meet the gang, right? And
Yeah.
there's that jump cut with the music. Like it was really funny for me.
I thought it was funny that like it only took 2 seconds for him to come back with like the full gang, because like remember before that they were
Yeah, it was, like,
beating up
beating them
on
up, yeah.
Home Lay and like
Yeah.
Muay, and he beats them up and he's like, "I'll get you back." And then they're like walking in the alleyway. He's like, "Oh, thanks for your help. Like I knew you could fight. We could use you." And then he comes back with like the entire gang.
Yeah.
Like it took you 5 seconds to run off and get back here. Like, all right, whatever serves the film, I guess. Right, I mean, there's just like a lot of like funny like coincidental moments in there.
Yeah.
When Homelay's like on top of the roof at night, and then like the letter magically floats by on the wind on his foot, and then, and then he like reads a letter from his dad. It's like, oh man.
But yeah, I really recommend you watch the other like Ong Bak films or even The Protector. That's another film from Tony Jaa that's really good.
He
I really
directed
recommend
the sequels, right?
I think
did
so.
2
I
and 3
think
himself.
yeah, I think 2 and 3 he directed.
It's like, I'm gonna take matters into my own hands.
But yeah,
Yeah, I
there
wanna-
are some crazier
Protector I'll
stunts in the other ones too. Like there's some bike stunts that he does that are just crazy.
He's such a low key character too. Like he's not like the persona of Ting isn't like Jackie Chan in the sense that he's like comedic or things like that. But he's not overly serious like Bruce Lee in
He's
a way
kind of like
either.
a humble dude. Like he's just like
Huh? Yeah, he's just like,
kinda
I'm
a
about my
humble
village.
dude. He's like, let me just get my statue head and leave.
Like and he's like super nice. Like he's only like badass when he fights, and then outside of it, he's just like, "Can I get my statue back?"
Yeah. I was like, I don't
Please.
care if I throw this match. I just need the statue.
Even that scene was like weird to me because it wasn't super clear when he has to throw the match with what's his name, Saming.
Yeah.
So
I
like,
think that was more like a reveal though. Like
yeah, I see what they
meant as a
wanted to do
reveal,
because it was like but it didn't really. I don't know. It didn't really work. I think to how it was kind of intended. Because like everything, because like, I mean, it was just so like seriously played. Where it was like, oh, this feels like a final fight sequence. You know what I mean? Like you knew Sam Ming is like the final like fight guy,
Boss.
like the rival, right?
Yeah.
And then when finally comes down for them to fight, and like the fight itself is like, Tang is like giving it his all, and Sam Ming is like taking them hits and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, like this is gonna be it. And then he loses, and I was like, oh, like of course he has to lose the first time because it's like a hero's journey kind of thing. Like I gotta learn something, and then I gotta go back and kick his ass. But then it turns out like, oh, you have to throw the fight so that way I can get my money back, and then I'm
Yeah.
gonna double cross you. And I was like, what? Like it just seemed a little outplaced that they had a pre-curd bet going on.
Yeah, like the gangster boss, he didn't tell Saming that it was a throw.
Right.
So I think that's what it was.
That
Like,
too.
he only
then, like,
tells him later. He's like, "Yo, he threw on purpose."
And then when it comes to, like the real final fight, you expect him to like demolish him because it's like I was only giving it like my partial best.
Yeah. But dude, that needle scene was just too much, though.
It was so funny. I thought he like killed him with like the final like elbow on top of his head.
Yeah, on
you
his
could
head.
see like the
The
blood, and
blood,
stuff
yeah.
coming out of his head, and then he gets back up and he's like, "All right, whatever."
Man, like it's so brutal, but it's so satisfying to see. You know what I mean? Like the hits.
Yeah, I mean that final like double drop knee like
Oh, yeah.
was just felt so iconic.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, take this through the floor, sir. Captain Falcon your ass.
Yeah, like they should make Tony Jaa as the playable character in Smash.
Some of his moves are like with Captain Falcon, like he does like, or it was Sam Ming like at the end of the ring fight, like Tony's or Ting is like on the table and he's like and then like the boss nods on him and he jumps over the ring and like
Yeah.
double stomps him through the table. It's like that sucks. Get out of here. Like Sam Ming actually kind of looks like the guy from Man from Nowhere. You know what I'm talking about?
The guy that he
the
fights?
Vietnamese guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A little bit, yeah.
a little bit. If he was like skinnier, if he was
Yeah.
like thinner, it's kind of beefy. Yeah. So let me see. What do I have here? Some did you know facts? Yeah, we kind of talked about like the movie definitely went through a few editing and like few different versions as it was acquired by like other companies and it was internationally distributed. It's like in China they kind of censored it with the breaking of the bone scenes, the breaking arm and leg. That whole subplot with the sister got cut out for the U.S. and Europe, so like basically it was bought by Europa, which is Luc Besson's company,
Yeah.
and then his company was able to distribute it here in the West, which that kind of sucked. I mean, like it wasn't like super appalling like we said earlier, but looking back, it was like, oh, so that's why he was like he knew who the girl was, like Hamle was like knew the girl's name and was like
Yeah.
crying for her and stuff.
Yeah.
And then like as you said, he was like trying to comfort Muay in that scene. But then it was like, how did they even know where Don lived? Like
Yeah.
they didn't even know. Like that scene would have bridged sort of like how they got there.
Thing is, it's just never a good look when the director intended something and they cut it to fit
Yeah.
whatever they have. It's never a good look. No, I always want to see what the original people intended, and since we aren't able to see that, it's kind of sad. But you know, it is what it is, I guess.
I thought the soundtrack was pretty cool, but I think there's a different soundtrack for the U.S. version as well.
Yeah, they changed the soundtrack.
Which was good. I
too.
liked it, but then I was wondering like, so then what is the original Thai soundtrack like? It definitely
Yeah, I mean,
worked,
it worked. It worked. Like, there's some fight scenes that the hip hop soundtrack kind of worked pretty well. But the first time when we go to Bangkok and that like music plays, the gangster music plays, I was laughing
This is
so
like Tokyo
hard
Drift.
because the music, the lyric literally is like gangster. If you listen to it, and I was like,
It's
wow,
so
this is
on
a
the
little
nose.
on the nose, you know.
There's also an alternative ending actually where Homely lives, which I
Yeah.
think is part of like the DVD release of the movie.
You know that they also have like these little like Easter eggs in the film where
So they have like
they're
Luc
like,
Besson.
"Hey, Luc Besson, hi! You know,
Steven
we're waiting for you." And like Steven Spielberg, we're waiting for you.
Come and help us out. We're low budget. Yeah, they have like they have a Spielberg and a Luc Besson kind of like homage in the movies, which I guess worked because Luc Besson bought the film. So good for you guys. Hey listeners, if you've tuned into more than one episode, you probably know that me and Lee are quite passionate about Asian movies. We actually got to start because we think that movies are meant to be discussed, and there are so many Asian movies out there to be discussed and to be discovered. Honestly, that goes for just about any international film, if you ask me. I've actually had an interest in podcasting before we launched one and decided to share our discussions and just launch a podcast of our own. Producing this show couldn't have been easier with Anchor. It's a true one-stop shop for literally everything podcasting. Even if you don't have the tech, Anchor is equipped with in-app recording, a music library, editing some segments, cover art. There's just so much flexibility to do. Even better, they help you distribute your podcast to popular platforms, which is why you guys can listen to us via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you guys are listening. To ice the cake, they even help you monetize your podcast by matching you up with sponsors. You gotta trust me, they literally take care of just about everything. So if you're on the fence, just jump. There's no excuse. Go to anchor.fm or download their app. It's all free to get started today.
It's always fun to watch this movie again. Like it brings me back to when I was young watching it.
Little Lee's life.
And just seeing this crazy dude doing crazy things. And I really recommend that you watch the other films too. It's more action and more crazy things that he does, and you'll have fun. You'll enjoy it, I think. So
more stakes, more action. Sign me up. Yeah, it's always fun to just, watch and talk about these martial arts films and action films. I mean, they're just fun movies all in all, and it's fun to kind of discuss about their crazy stunts and the crazy mentality these people have to even do it. Yeah. And just like the ability that they can do it. It's like, are you even human? Are you like a meta-human walking among us? Yeah, all in all, like, really fun movie. Definitely could recommend anybody. It is like a classic. And yeah, I mean, like, it's really it is definitely a movie that is up there with Bruce Lee films and Jackie Chan's films, all in all. So you can't get enough in your life of martial arts. So moving on for next week, we will be going into a more of a comedy kind of rom-com-y vibe. I honestly don't remember too much. I've only seen this movie like once, like years ago, but it is called Heart Attack, and it came out in 2015. I don't know the director's name, but if you have... Oh, it says you can watch it on Apple TV. So if you have Apple TV, easy peasy. Everybody else, good luck. Actually, my memories of this film, I really liked it. It's like one of those, like, different, interesting, like, indie films. Like, I don't really know how to describe it, but it feels like... it's very, like, indie, but it feels kind of nice in a way. I don't know.
Thank you for the great explanation.
No problem, guys. You're welcome.
In detail.
That's on me. That's my English for you.
Very specific.
It's like a festival hit. Like, you go to a festival and you're like, oh, that's a really good one. Like, I'm glad I got to see that one. You know what I mean? Like, you weren't expecting it to be that good. It's one of those feelers.
Okay.
But we'll see you then. Peace.
Bye-bye.